We're gonna fly. Go, go, go. Oh, shine all out. In the summer sun, we're a summer-loving crowd. Talking Brazil ball, we're breaking it down.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Talking Brazil Ball, the podcast or the show, whichever you prefer, George, all about Brazilian football. We're here for another jam-packed episode. I'm here, as always, your host, James, with my co-host, George. How are we doing today, George? What have you got? What have you been learning for us this week in Portuguese?
Yeah, Ben, I'm okay, James. Obrigado. Como vai to you?
Yeah, Bem, I guess. Bem.
Yeah, bueno. Yeah,
No, I think
I'll say it's e terça-feira bem-vindo, which means it's Tuesday. Welcome. Talking Brazil ball. It's talking Brazil ball.
Yeah, we all know that one by now, don't we? Tuesday is Talking Brazil Day, Talking Brazil Ball Day, sorry, and we've got a brand new logo, haven't we, George? I don't know if you just want to mention that, if any of the eagle-eyed viewers might have spotted it.
Yeah, we've had a new logo, a rebranding, James, I suppose they call it, don't they? But shout out to my mate who's done us a solid one on this one. Yes, he's done a really good.
What's going on here then? What's happening? What are you trying?
No, he's done a really good logo. Christian, thank you, Christian, for that. It's sound. Yeah, have a look at it on the social media channels, everybody, if you want to have a look at that. But thank you to him. He's also a Leeds fan, so all Leeds, aren't we? You know, and he also did a one for me on my Bearded Peacock channel as well. So go and have a look if you want to at that as well. But he's a good man, and he's a Leeds fan. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure those two things go together, but thank you, Christian. It's a very good job he's done there. Well, let's get on with the show anyway, George, today, because speaking on Leeds, they've got a game later on that you need to rush off and watch, subject yourself to, don't they? So why don't you start by wrapping up what's happened since we last spoke to the viewers or the listeners since last Tuesday. There's been a full round of fixtures, and then I think maybe one or two on top, although I don't think maybe this week. I think it's just the 10 games, isn't it, this week?
Yeah, there's nothing on top. You always seem to get confused, James, about it, but no,
because Inter and Gremio had those two games last week, wasn't it? And I couldn't remember it. I know they've still got a game in hand, and I couldn't remember if they had played, but
they haven't played. But I will round that up before, because it was after we did the pod last week. Actually,
well, that's what I mean. There you go, then.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's me, isn't it? But yes. That's it, yeah. Like you said, subjecting myself to a bit of torture later on with Leeds, probably. But there you go. So Wednesday, the 25th, there were games in hand. Gremio 1, Criciúma 2, RB Bragantino 2, Inter 2. So Inter last week's game week then. Palmeiras 2, Galo 1. Into Sunday, Botafogo 0, Gremio 0, Juventude 1, RB Bragantino 1. Gio 1, Flu 0, Fortaleza 1, Cuiabá 0, Sao Paulo 3, Corinthians 1 in a Sao Paulo derby. James, a bit of a feisty one in the end, I think. Bahia 1, Criciúma 0, Cruzeiro 1, Vasco 1, Inter 3, Vitória 1, and Flamengo 1, Atlético Paranaense 0. Wrapped up the match week early doors on Monday morning, English time.
Yeah, very good. Lots to get into, George. As you said, quite a feisty Sao Paulo derby. There were two sending-offs, weren't there, from Corinthians? We might touch on that a little bit later, but let's start off with the games of the round, because you went down the bottom of the table, George, as you do seem to do occasionally, and you were rewarded for doing so with an absolutely enormous win for Atletico Gio. So do you want to get into that one and say, you know, what went wrong for Flu in a terrible kind of week for them, and what finally went right for Atletico Gio, who we've written off in the past, but aren't that far away now from safety?
Yeah, look, James, it was an amazingly bad result for Fluminense, wasn't it? You know, the three without a win. I think they've lost 3 in a row now in the league. And they just can't seem to get out of that relegation zone. They're just sandwiched in it all the time. And, even the teams below them are dropping points as well. And they just can't seem to take advantage and boost themselves out of it. It's a horrendous result, this. And for all you can find, Gio deserved the win. I mean, it's a huge win for Gio. Like you said, James, I think we have written them off. I certainly have. Even after this result, to be fair, they're so far behind, and they just seem to win one and then lose, 3 or 4 or 5. You know what I mean? And it's just not good enough in terms of form. But it's a huge win, and I think, it was a little bit contentious. I don't know if you've seen the goal, James, the one that won it. A lot of people were did it go out? Did it not? Did the ball cross the line on the byline on Gio's right hand side? A bit of contention, and I think the Flu defence just stopped and and let the man be in the middle. There was still a lot to do for them to score that goal, but Fluminense just froze, and it was a strange finish as well. To be honest with you, James, I wasn't. It just looked a bit funny, the way it went in the net from Jadison. It was one of them where it kind of deflected off the defender as he kicked the ball, and it just kind of flew into the top corner, and that won the game in the 88th minute, James. So it was very, very late on, but Fluminense, by all accounts, really didn't deserve anything from this game, and they had absolutely nothing of. They had a lot of possession, but they didn't really do much with it. Lots of peppering of the goal, Gio's goal, but again, nothing really to show with it, with only 2 attempts on target. It was a really poor game for them. And Mano Menendez has come in for some real stick, James, now. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because I find it's just a bit silly. I mean, he's been going through these phases of sort of interactions with the crowd, which is a bit unsavoury, really. And one was he blew a kiss at a Galo fan after Lima scored in that first leg of the Copa Libertadores, and then it came back to bite them. With obviously Galo came back and won the second leg, didn't they? He also then he's put a middle finger up, I think, to a fan in the Botafogo game, or he gave them a banana. He gave a Botafogo fan a banana 20 minutes into the game, and I don't understand what it was. This, but then I think he gave him the finger as well. And he had to say this, that's how it is on the sidelines. Some days you send kisses and some days you send the finger. It's annoying. It's everywhere. If after 20 minutes you already have something to complain about, it's because you're annoying. Then you deserve a finger. So he sounds a bit like a SHIT house to me, James, this Mano, really. And then, again, the game on the weekend, he had a little bit of sort of to and fro with the Gio fans. They basically were shouting at him, "You're going to be relegated," and he basically said, he's allegedly said, "We're all going to be relegated." So, but he came out and said it was absolutely nothing like that. We already have problems to solve. There is nothing like that. We believe that we will get out of this situation. So he was basically downplaying it, saying, "I didn't do that." But I think people have kind of heard him. It was actually a reporter by the name of Rafael Sieber, and he said that I think he was, under the assumption that he'd said this thing like, "Oh, we're all going to get relegated," but I don't know. He's coming under a bit of pressure, and his team really didn't do him any favours in this game at all. It was one, to be fair, I had a bit of a banker on Fluminense winning this game, really. But, they've really got to pick themselves up now. It's a massive game on Friday morning, coming up with the man behind you, isn't it? Diniz, who'll be wanting to put one over on them as well. So they need to get out and do themselves a favour. But the manager doesn't seem to be doing himself any favours in the process, to be fair.
I didn't have him down as that kind of character. I mean, to be fair, I'm not only just introduced to him when he was hired at Flu. I know he's been around a long time. I didn't see him as that kind of character. I thought he seemed like a bit more of a, a kind of solid and professional kind of character to steady the ship. But yeah, I don't mind a bit of that sometimes. I think fans don't mind a bit of that sometimes as well. But it really is tied up with your team winning, isn't it? If your manager's doing that and you're losing games, it can feel a bit much, that I think. And like you said, it probably isn't helping him that he's becoming so much in the public kind of eye with those kind of things. And he probably just wants to settle down from doing that a bit. I mean, like you said, at one stage where they put a couple of wins together, we did feel as though they pulled themselves out of it, but they are very much in there. I mean, it's going to be crucial, that game in hand that they've got. I don't know who it's against, but they're 1 point away from Corinthians, and they're 1 point away from Vittoria, which is of course safety. They do have a game in hand on both of those teams, so you feel like that game in hand is going to be crucial, really, to whether they can pull themselves out of it. Still 11 games left, there's still a little way to go, but it's looking a lot tighter than it felt like it was going to be up until probably a month ago, really. And like you said, they're out the Libertadores, and might help them in a way that they can now just focus on the league. But obviously they were proud holders of that competition. They wanted to go through. They probably felt as though they could after winning that first leg against Gallo. I mean, you're obviously pleased as a Gallo fan, George, but how did you see that one? Who do you see winning the semi-final? Is it River Plate they've got in the semi?
Yeah, it's River Plate, James. Delighted, obviously. And I did say last week that I think that I fancy them to do it. And Davison obviously got the goal of the round last week. He had a fabulous sort of cameo performance with 2 goals, which effectively won them the tie. So, yeah, I think Gallo will fancy it against River Plate. Whether they're going to win the Libertadores, on the other side, it's
Botafogo.
Yeah, Botafogo and Penarol. So, yeah, look, I think they'll fancy that as well, whoever they play. I think on a one-off game, they'll probably fancy the chances against either of those two sides as well. So they've got to go in with confidence. I mean, we all know what I think of, of Gallo's league form, which is horrendous. I know we'll touch on them a bit later, won't we, James? But it's not been good enough. But I do fancy them, and I was delighted. I mean, piles of pressure on Mano, but Fluminense are just a bit of a mess at this current moment, and delighted for them to get that win. And again, I'm saying that it's Milito, his performances in such things like Libertadores, it's keeping them in a job.
Yeah, they're still in the cup as well, of course, so they do still have a chance to go for a double, which would definitely make up for that league form. And just before we move on, George, what about Gio? I mean, you said the miles off it there. They're only 6 points, but with 10 games left, it feels as though, a minimum of 3 wins really it is probably beyond them just about. But they've given themselves a little bit of a chance with that win, haven't they?
Yeah, look, they can only win. They can only win games, can't they? And I think like I said, I didn't have them in any way, shape, or form winning this game, so it's a little bit of a bonus that they have. But only 21 points, only 5 wins all season from 28 games, James. Like you said, the 6 points, the 7 points away from safety at this moment in time, aren't they? So, that gives them, like you said, 3 wins. And I don't see them doing it personally. But you never know. I think that their man... Umberto Lauza, he was delighted, obviously, with this win. And I think, like I said, it was for all intents and purposes, it was deserved. Even though, Flu had a lot more possession, they weren't effective with it. The goal was contentious, but you'll never know if it crossed the byline or not, to be fair. You could never see from the angle that we were given, only the 2 players, and they might not even know, as well. So, like I said, Fluminense just froze and he put it in the net. So there you go. They'll be delighted. I mean, it's another game gone up. It's a massive game for them on Thursday evening. Actually, the game week starts a bit earlier this time round, James, with a game against Krishuma. So if they can win that, then a bit of confidence starts to creep in again. It's another sort of relegation 6-pointer, really.
Yeah, that'll pull Kashuma down if they can get a win. That'll put the pressure on them. And like you said, relatively new manager there, Umberto Lauza. We don't quite know what he'll give them, so maybe they can put that run together. He's obviously doesn't carry the baggage from the rest of the season, so perhaps they can spring a late surprise. We'll see. It's certainly a good way for them to start anyway. Thank you for that one, George. That's a good roundup of a big game down at the bottom. My game was more of a mid-table kind of clash, really, unless there was anything else you just wanted to add on that one, the flu game.
No, I don't think so, James. I think that's it. I wanted to get a point that, across the points of Mano, really. I think that was my main sort of aim of it, really, just to highlight, his sort of discrepancies in a way, and he's sort of coming under a little bit of pressure. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, like I said, mine was a mid-table game, so two teams who were, well, certainly safe from relegation, really, which is no mean feat in some ways. Cruzeiro and Vasco have both flirting with relegation last year, but they've both kind of pulled themselves up this year, George. Both have had pretty good seasons. And the reason why I wanted to focus on Cruzeiro is, of course, because of Fernando Diniz. We're waiting to see which club he would re-emerge at in the Brasileirão, and it's turned out at Cruzeiro, which was a bit of a surprise given that they've done a pretty good job this year, and Fernando Seabra probably undeserving of being sacked. I think we concluded that last week, really, and whoever gets him next, I think, is getting a good manager. But this was a bit of a test for Diniz. It wasn't his first game. He did have the draw against Libertad in the Sudamericana quarterfinal, which saw them through into the semi-final. And like we said last week, I think they've hired him really with one eye on winning that trophy. But, with them being safe in the Brasileirão, maybe you can try one or two of his kind of strange ideas, tactical ideas, and without too much threat of worry, and then take them into the Sudamericana and see if they can progress in that. So, I mean, it wasn't a great result for either team, really. This was a 1-1 draw in the end, George. Vasco, as we know, have been going kind of relatively well, but can't really seem to break up into that top kind of 8. There's quite a bit of a gap forming now. They're now 7 points behind Cruzeiro, so it feels like they're probably not going to be able to close that gap now between them and the top 8. They really felt they had to win this one, really, and they were ahead in this one, George. Vegetti, who has been obviously so crucial to them this season, pounced on a bit of a loose ball in the box and put them ahead. And then there was a really nice header which levelled things up in the second half for Cruzeiro. There seemed to be a lot of headers this week, didn't there, I thought? But this one was a really good one, just hung it up in the air, backstick, Ivaldo. And that was the end of the scoring, really. There was a late sending off by Cacao. Late on. I think it was Cacao. It's not Cacao, it looks like to me, but he was sent off. Piver actually said just before he was planning just to take Cacao off before he got sent off, but he got sent off anyway. So they had to weather a bit of a storm at the end of the game, but they managed to get through it. So yeah, not too much to say about this one, unfortunately, really, George. It was a relatively kind of serene one. I mean, Cruzeiro obviously are focusing on that Sudamericana semi. They're hoping that Mateus Pereira is going to be back fit because he missed this one. We know how crucial he has been to them this season. He missed this one through a bit of muscle discomfort, so we'll see if he's going to be back. And for Vasco, they're focusing on the Cup semi-final, George. They've got Copa do Brazil, I think, on this Wednesday. I think it's against Galo, isn't it? It's this Wednesday, the first leg. So they obviously were one eye on that one, really. And yeah, they probably both teams shook hands on a draw a little bit, I think, here. As you said, just in the analysis of Flu there, big game for them coming up against their old boss in the next week. So Diniz, will be heading to the Maracanã with a few wrongs to right. Sorry, perhaps. And I fancy Cruzeiro to win that, really, and pile on the misery on Flu. But yeah, as I said, not a great deal, unfortunately, to get into on this one. I don't know what you think about Diniz's appointment. We did look on it a little bit last week, didn't we? But do you see Cruzeiro getting through in that Sudamerica? I think we spoke about it. I think we'd probably put them as favourites, really, looking at the other teams that are in there with them.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's funny because obviously they're playing Lanús, aren't they? Who are Argentinian, aren't they? So that we'll wait and see. I mean, they're not doing very well actually at all in the Argentine league. Really, sort of mid-table. I think they'll probably be disappointed with that. But yeah, I fancy them to kind of go at least to the final. The other is Corinthians and Racing Club, isn't it? So another Brazilian-Argentine matchup. And, I text you earlier, didn't I, to be fair, saying Corinthians, their schedule is just crazy. So, there's a lot of pressure on them. They're fighting on free fronts, they're fighting relegation as well from the league. So I think that's going to be a really tricky tie for Corinthians, that one against Racing. I fancy them to win it with Diniz in charge, James. I do. And I think that would be an incredible achievement, to be fair. But it's a great appointment, I think, this. I didn't, like you said, I didn't see it coming at all. And sort of come out of nowhere a little bit. And like you said, probably with him, the Sudamericana in mind to win, really, because you know what he's like. He's got a big, he's got a good CV, hasn't he, of winning things. So, really good appointment. I fancy them to win it.
Yeah, they've never won the Copa Sudamericana. Actually, they have won the Libertadores twice, 1976 and 1997. So, obviously not for nearly 30 years now. So, it would be a really big achievement, to be fair. And you can, from that point of view, perhaps it makes a little more sense to get in a coach who has very recently tasted success in continental football. But yeah, I mean, Corinthians on the flip side of that, it's a heck of a season they're having in many ways. I mean, it's not often you see that, is it? A club in the relegation zone who are, also going for two different cups themselves in the semi-finals. It's a bit of a bizarre one, and it'd be interesting to hear the fans' kind of perspective on that. Would they rather win a cup, or if they could trade off, win a cup but you go down, or you stay up and you win nothing? I think they'd probably rather stay up, wouldn't they? In fairness, but obviously you can't choose those things in football, and ideally they'd probably say, well, we'll stay up and we'll win them both, which maybe that'll happen. It would be a pretty amazing season, wouldn't it? But I don't know what you think about the cup semi-final coming up as well, George. Like I said, Vasco are playing Galo, obviously your team. Which way do you see that one going?
To be fair, I think Vasco are a funny team, aren't they? They can kind of spring a surprise. I'm a big fan, as you are, of Paiva. I think he's done a fabulous job, and obviously he's got the job permanently now, which is fully deserved. And they've got a good mix of kind of old veteran players and sort of real good youth players. So it's going to be a tricky one for Galo, but Galo seem to just be able to come through these cup ties this season particularly. And I fancy Galo to do the final as well in the cup as well as the Libertadores, to be honest with you. And then I think I know we're going to touch on Fla a bit later on because there's big news obviously for them as well. But this one with Corinthians is quite an interesting matchup. But I think Flamengo will win that. So I think it'll be Galo Flamengo in the final of the cup. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty sound prediction. It sounds like a good game as well. We will be there. Well, not physically, but we'll be there.
Well, you never know, do you? There's still time. Yeah, I don't know when the final is actually, but
still time for some hospitality, some hospo tickets to come through, isn't there? We'll won't hold a breath on that one anyway, George. But those are the games of the week. So plenty to. I mean, it's that time of season now, isn't it? Where everything means a little bit more, and there's cup semis and finals on the horizon, so lots to get into from that respect. But let's move on to the awards this week. There wasn't a lot of kind of contenders in by way of player of the round, I didn't think. I mean, it was not a difficult one to pick, this, was it?
No, I think all of them, James. I was thinking about this. All three awards this week. We usually have a little bit of a debate or a bit of something to look at, and maybe one or two disagreements over, and then finally come into a conclusion. But this week it seems pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward, to be fair, in all three respects. And this one was it was an easy one to give. It was Wesley for Inter, James, for your team, of course. He got 2 goals in a 3-1 win over Vitória. Nobody really came close to that. I know Vega got 2 goals, but there were 2 pens, weren't they, in their win over Galo. And I think people, scoring 2 penalties is still impressive, but you know what I mean? I think Wesley gets it this time.
Yeah, the first one was a really nice goal. He kind of beat his man, I think his man wasn't expecting. He knocked it past him in the penalty area, kind of dinked it over the keeper. Second one was a tap-in, which was made really, really nicely by the only other contender I thought was the player of the round. I know you say Vega, and of course it was 2 big penalties he stepped up and took. But Alan Patrick for Inter as well, George, got a goal and an assist, and a really nice assist at that for Wesley. Wesley actually thanked Alan Patrick publicly after the game for the part he played in that. And I just wanted to speak quickly on Alan Patrick because he's in absolutely brilliant form, George. We all know how well Inter are doing. At the moment, they're unbeaten in 8 now, 6 wins out of those 8 games. They're really flying. And Patrick's actually scored 4 goals and laid on 2 assists in his last 5 games. So for a kind of an attacking midfielder, those are really good numbers. And, you can see that he's a quality player. He's getting on slightly now, Patrick, but he's still got a big part to play at Inter. And as has Wesley, to be fair. So I thought Patrick was the only one who was close to Wesley, but 2 Inter players really coming up big for them. Wesley is still, I think, the top scorer in the Brazilian Serie A for them. That was his 7th, I think, this season. So, he's a player who has been important for them throughout the season, even when they weren't doing particularly well. So it's nice to give him that recognition when he's won them the game with 2 goals.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I really like that first goal, actually. Just a little, I mean, the defending, it has to be said, it was awful, to be fair.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
But I think they're just kind of giving up a little bit, unfortunately. But it was a really nice little turn of pace, wasn't it, to just get past the defender and then finish it off. And yeah, I know he's talked up the chances of winning the title, hasn't he, Wesley, over the the recent weeks. But you've got to say, James, they're 8 unbeaten. They've won 6 of those games, and I think Mercado's just doing an amazing job, to be fair. And to be fair, James, they'll be calling him Super Mercado, won't they, soon? I don't think he'll be wanting that nickname, will he? Be like to a supermarket. I don't know, but
I think it's slightly different, and it's slightly differently pronounced probably than when we're to. It's probably more like a Macado, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
I'm not sure, but Super Mercado. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be. Oh, is that what you're calling him? Is it? I suppose it's your team, isn't it? You'll be delighted. Yeah, I mean, they're on a real good, vein of form, James, and I don't see it stopping. We said it before, thinking the sort of pausing the season for the international break a few weeks ago. I think we're both in the agreement that they will push on now with the remaining 11 games of the season to try and get into them Libertadores places. They're only 3 points off Flamengo now. They played the same amount of games as, well, just one less than a few of them, but some of them have played less games now. You've got Paranense who've played 26 and Inter have now played 27. So they've caught up pretty much. And they're just going really, really well. I thought Wesley deserved that man of the match and, player of the round award from us. And, long may it continue from your point of view, James. They've got Corinthians next one, which you'd expect to probably be another win. So, like I said, given Corinthians' hectic schedule, it's, they'll be knackered. So, it's going really well.
Yeah, they'll probably just be disappointed to have given up the lead at Bragantino in midweek in that game. I think they were 2-0 ahead possibly in that, although I might be wrong in saying that, but they were certainly ahead until late on in the game. Sorry, no, they weren't. They were behind, weren't they? They were ahead, then they were behind, then they equalised. So probably disappointed perhaps not to win that one given the form of Bragantino, but, like you said, it's still not a loss, and given the place they were when Mercado came in, I think you can only say good things about the job he's done, and a patient job as well, because things didn't start well for him. And I'm pretty sure by now the fans will mostly be, forgiven his Gremio past and will be, he's very much their man at this point. So, but Wesley, just one thing, George, to say that he was a former Vitória player actually. So it was interesting. I know you're a fan of players celebrating against their old clubs if it's tastefully done and everything. And he did celebrate. He kind of launched himself over the advertising boards and kind of ran towards the Inter fans. There was nothing kind of, he didn't look like he was trying to kind of piss anyone off or anything. He just looked like he was celebrating his goal, and that was nice to see. The fans are very far away from the stadium, actually, at the Beira Rio, the Inter Stadium. I think there was a running track around it. They seemed a pretty far way away anyway. But yeah, he enjoyed that against his old team. And from Vittoria's point of view, George Carpini actually was slightly disappointed after the game. It seemed he felt that Inter were there for the taking a little bit, and they kind of missed the opportunity to pull away from the relegation zone a little bit. They're still not in the relegation zone; they're just above it. They've given themselves a real fighting chance up to this point, but perhaps they need to be just taking advantage if an opportunity does present itself, because Flu and Corinthians, are really desperately trying to catch them.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're averaging a point a game, aren't they? 28 games, 28 points now. So I'm amazed, actually, to be honest with you, that Vittoria haven't slipped into the relegation zone, really. But it just says that, like, the teams below them, Corinthians, Fluminense, just can't seem to, like I said, they just can't seem to push themselves out of it. It's only a point. Corinthians are level on points, behind them a few goals behind them on goal difference, and Flu are only 1 point behind them, so they just can't seem to do it. And Vittoria just seem to be getting away with it a little bit. I know they did win the last couple of games before that defeat to Inter, actually. So they're pushing themselves. They're pushing hard. It's going to go right to the wire, to be fair. And like I've said before, with these 17th and 18th position, it's going to go right to the wire. I think the other two are probably gone. Definitely, I think more than so than Cuiabá, even though they're a couple of points ahead of Gio. I think they're gone. But the other two positions, it's anybody's, really.
Yeah, definitely. And Vittoria will be surely fighting right to the end. But well done to Wesley there, the player of the round. And unbelievably, George, we've got a Talking Brazil ball first here, where two players by the same name have won the two player and the young player of the round awards. I don't think there's any relation. I mean, there was another Wesley, wasn't there, of course, for Corinthians earlier in the season, who's since gone to Saudi Arabia. But yeah, Wesley of Flamengo has won the young player of the round this week. So two Wesleys have kind of come up good this week. And again, like you said, Georgia, was very limited competition on this one. Wesley was the only one really who did anything of note. But just before we talk about Wesley, I want to talk about the huge news coming out of Flamengo this week, or yesterday, actually, only yesterday morning. It was announced, George, that Tite, the Flamengo, the kind of legendary is probably a bit too far, but very highly respected coach, formerly of Brazil, has been sacked or resigned. I don't know. It was initially reported as resigned. You seem to think he's been sacked. Either way, the end result is that Tite is no longer the Flamengo manager, George, and Felipe Luis, the former Chelsea, Atletico, and Flamengo, of course, left back, is going to take over interim charge. So, George, I know you were a huge fan of Tite. I know you backed Flamengo for the title. First of all, your reaction to this news, and where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, I would say disappointing, James. Disappointed with that. I really am. Like, I am a fan of Tite, and I think it was almost him, in a way, his influence, in a sense, that was tipping me at the very start when we started Talking Brazil Ball, James, to maybe support Flamengo, and he was definitely an influence in that. Yeah, just disappointing. And I think I don't know, it's been on the cards for a little bit now. I think I did ask you the question, maybe, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, what you thought of Tite. Do you think he's nearing the end of his tenure there? And you've got to say, to be fair, it's fair enough, really. They've got massive expectations at Flamengo, and being knocked out the Libertadores was obviously a really, really disappointing end to a campaign from Penarol as well. They would have fancied themselves to win that tie, and they've obviously miserably lost it by 1-0. The form in the league is pretty sketchy as well. It's a real strange one, because they've done well at the start of the year, but they just stagnated a bit, and I don't think it was ever really going to go any other way in the end. He's just about a year in charge. Tite, October last year, so it's October today, and so he's just short of a year really in charge of of the club. But like you said, very well respected. He hasn't really he's just Corinthians and well, actually no, he's had a massive long career, hasn't he, of managing all sorts of teams. I don't think he's managed outside of Brazil, to be fair, or maybe just for a short time in Saudi Arabia possibly. But yeah, very well respected. I'm really disappointed with this because I do quite like him, but there you go. And when you're you text me about this one, and the name of Felipe Luis didn't click with me initially straight away, and I thought, oh, who's that? You know what I mean? But I thought, oh, why are you telling me who's one of the other 21? I thought he was just a random coach, but obviously the name didn't click immediately. But obviously he is well respected with Flamengo. Ended his career with Flamengo, didn't he, last season? He's won titles with them and stuff. So he's well respected. Obviously spent a bit of time with Chelsea under Mourinho, didn't he? And obviously a long time with Atletico Madrid and Deportivo La Coruña as well. So, it's a test for him. But he said he knows the players. He's trained with basically all of the players in the squad, and he hasn't got long before their Copa do Brazil game with Corinthians. So it's a big turnaround. It's a quick turnaround for him, and we'll see how he gets on.
Yeah, big shoes to fill in some ways, but probably helps him a bit. The club feels a little bit like it's in a rebuilding phase. I think last season was a similarly disappointing one. I think they finished fourth as well, and obviously went out of all the cups at kind of relatively early stages. I think they didn't make the mark anyway, and Tite was obviously supposed to be the man who restored them back to challenging, and it's interesting to it'd be interesting to know really his side of things, where things have gone, because it's a very strong squad on paper, and they should be higher than they are in the league. They should have probably got past Peñarol, though Peñarol are a huge club in their own right in South America and in Uruguay, obviously, but Flamengo should have been beating them really, and the Copa do Brazil can be a bit of a silver lining, but it's going to be difficult. I think expectations need to be managed a bit with Felipe Luis. Obviously, it might benefit them that they've got Corinthians, who obviously are, as we know, like we've spoken about, are really patchy as well. But I think it'd be interesting to see which direction they go in. Obviously, we've seen a few teams now go for the younger managers, and it hasn't really worked out with Verini and obviously the guy at Cuiabá isn't particularly doing great, although he wasn't starting from a position of strength there. But do they go that way, or do they try and get somebody in who might be a little bit more of a safer bet? We'll see which way they go.
Well, yeah, because we I think we look at a lot Globo, don't we, the website, and they did put a poll out. I think it was yesterday, James, and I text you now with Rafa Benitez. His name was on there. There's a few others. Kuka, who I also like as well, was on there, and there's a few others that have recognizable names. But Felipe Luis won this poll by a landslide. Over 12,000 people wanted him as the next coach. So he's got a lot of backing also from the fans from the very off. Like I said, he seems very well liked in the club. Spent 4 years there to end his career. Obviously, Brazilian international as well, 40-odd caps for his country. So very popular figure, it seems. So whether, if he gets the results, I don't see why the board wouldn't give him the job permanent. I think they have given him a longer contract till maybe the summer of next year. But in what capacity, who knows what it'll be yet. But he obviously is a youth coach at the club anyway. So if it don't work out, he'll probably just go back to his youth coaching with the under-20s team. But it's an interesting appointment. It really is. I'm fascinated to see how they go. But what's more, I'm really miffed at why they did it after a win. I know it was a sketchy win, wasn't it? Gerson got the goal, and we will talk about it, won't we, because of Wesley's involvement in it. But yeah, it just seemed a bit odd to me. Why don't you just do it after the Libertadores game? That it was only a couple of days before, so it didn't seem to make any difference to me. I thought it was a little bit strange.
No, I think that's probably your answer. There probably wasn't a lot of turnaround time, and they probably thought, they've made the decision already, and they probably just thought maybe they'd even spoke to Tite before the game and said, look, it's going to be your last game. these things don't always have to be hugely acrimonious. It can be an understanding. Tite looked a bit defeated when you'd seen him recently. I think perhaps I'd already spoken to him and they said, look, there's not enough time to get Felipe Luis in to do a training sessions and stuff. The game comes too quickly. So would you mind taking this one, as a bit of a last one, and then we'll change it afterwards. You don't know the conversations that kind of go on. I don't think, the writing was on the wall, obviously, for him. It didn't matter what the result of that one would have been. Maybe it helped him, some kind of dignified exit in a way that he's gone out with a win rather than a kind of a defeat, but the end result is the same. I don't think it matters all that much when they do it. I mean, the important thing is they got 3 more points on the ball, which were kind of needed as they go for those top 4. They're still not out of the title race, George. I think it's important to point out that the 9 points behind Botafogo, they do have a game in hand. With 10 games left, if they're 6 points behind, to me, they're just about in that still. All right, very, very loosely hanging on, but I feel they're just about in there. But I don't think those inside the club, probably having made this decision, probably share the same view, because obviously Tite would be a better bet to go into that title race with. But anyway, let's see how they do. It's going to be interesting to watch them over the next few months. I mean, Rafa Benitez would be an incredibly interesting appointment if that was to happen. But like you said, the fans are behind Luis. I'm sure that will change if there's a few bad results. But for now, let's see how he does. But obviously, let's touch on Tite's last game there, George. Like you said, Wesley provided the winner. It was in the very, very last minute. So he's a right back, Wesley, 21 years old. When we looked at Flamengo, I think it was last week or the week before, they had that I think it was last week, they had that incredibly young team Tite put out in the hope of fielding obviously his best 11 and turning round that result against Peñarol. They couldn't do that anyway, but Wesley was one of those who started that game and was one of the more experienced players in that 11, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. 95 games he's played for Flamengo at 21. That's quite impressive, to be fair. And he's only just turned 21 at the start of September as well. So, like I said, he was very much more of a senior face in that youthful squad that he put out last weekend, wasn't it? And and they got beat off Gremio. But yeah, it's a name that we've mentioned before. He's not really pulled up any trees, to be fair. That was only his second goal of involvement, second assist in the whole season. So he's sort of quietly gone about his business, but it's the second young player of the award in a row that goes to a Flamengo player, of course, as well, James. I mean, the other lads this time were nowhere to be seen, really, were they, on the bench or anything in the squad, to be fair. There were one or two of them, the likes of Everton Arejo and Loran, but other than that, the other guys were nowhere to be seen. So, yeah, we're very much an experimental thing for Tite over the last few games. But it's, like I said, he's gone out with a win. It's an important result, really, James, because they're were on the edge of losing the top 4. You say they aren't out of it. I think they are, but you know what I mean. Mathematically, they're not. But I think they are. The teams above them, the 3 teams above them, are just going too well, I think, for them to be able to make a dent in it, really.
Yeah, that's probably realistically true, isn't it? But anyway, it was a nice assist for Wesley. He kind of cut back onto his left, whipped it in for Gerson, who, again, it was a good header and a nice header just out of reach of the goalkeeper. Only place he could have really put it that he would have scored. And yeah, well done to Wesley. Kept on going and turned up big for Flamengo. And like I said, a lot of youth players in there maybe will. The players who, like you said, Felipe Luis will have worked with, and there's a lot of them coming through who he can perhaps, look forward to working with in a bigger capacity next season, the likes of Teresa and those fellas who we did mention last week. On the flip side of that, George, was Atletico Paranense, who we must say are in a really, really poor run of form themselves. They were also dumped out of continental competition midweek. They got absolutely annihilated 4-1 by Racing Club, who you mentioned were in the semi-final, and they were actually won the first leg of that as well. So they were 1-0 up heading into the game. They got battered 4-1. And they're right down there in the mix for relegation as well. They've got a new manager, as we know, Lucho Gonzalez, who I don't know if you've seen him, George. He looks like he belongs in a kind of a biker gang or something like that. Tattoos all over his body, up his neck. He looks like a pretty imposing figure, Lucho Gonzalez. But he was pretty happy with this game afterwards. The attitude of his players was good. And yeah, I think that they're just going to have to hope that he can come in and do something to just pull them out of that, because they're in a bit of trouble, aren't they?
They are, James. I mean, they've got a couple of games in hand on a few of the teams around them. But they're only 3 points above the relegation zone now. They're on a horrendous run of form. Gonzalez has got to pick them up. And yeah, look, it's a difficult game to play, isn't it? Regardless of what position Flamengo are in, what's going on there at the Maracanã. It's always a difficult place to play, isn't it? And it's a difficult first league game for him. And coming off the back of that hammering in the Continental Cup as well, it's a difficult one for them to pull themselves out of, and they've got Botafogo, which is a really difficult game on Sunday. This coming Sunday. So, look, it's not getting any easier for them. The time is running out, and I think just given the fact that there's only 2 more relegation positions available, they might just squeeze it through just because of that. The run out of space for them to go down, but. To be fair, let's see how Gonzalez does. But I think they deserve to go down, actually, because they've just thrown it away. They've thrown the season. They've just been in horrendous form for quite a number of months now, and it's just not good enough. Obviously, Verini was a really wrong appointment to make at a time, and obviously Kuka, if he'd have stayed, who knows what would have happened. But it just went wrong from that moment that he left, and they just haven't been able to get any sort of form. Ironically, the Continental Cups up until that 4-1 defeat was where they were doing well, and also the Brazilian Cup. But what can you do? Staying up is paramount, and let's see if they can do it.
Yep, let's see. Up the other end of the table, George, is where our goal of the round is going this week. There weren't too many contenders again in this respect. I think that there was 1 or 2 nice goals. Yuri Alberto got a nice finish for Corinthians. I know there was a couple of volleys which we liked the look of. Hercules for Fortaleza, which won them the game. And again, Fortaleza, we should just say quickly, have bounced back from their kind of slump in form, where it wasn't really a slump. They lost to Botafogo, obviously they lost to Inter, but they bounced back and they're still right up there at the top of the table. Cowley as well for Bahia was a really nicely taken volley, hit into the ground, which went in over the keeper. That gave Bahia a 1-0 win as well. So they're kind of back to decent form up in the top 6. But George, the winner was a game for Hulk, for your boys, the Fragas, who was obviously not a good day for them in terms of the result, but he scored a nice free kick, didn't he, to level the scores with Palmeiras. A really lovely goal, a kind of classic Hulk goal in many ways.
Yeah, I think it was. It was a lovely finish, wasn't it? It's long-range free kick. What's not the like about one of them? And I think, like you said, there wasn't a great deal of competition for it really either. But Hercules and Hulk, James, are we talking about football here? Are we talking about something else? But yeah, there you go. It was a great. And I'm a big fan of Hulk. I've been quite sort of. I have been damning on him a little bit this season because I think he's done a lot of talking after defeats and stuff. But he is, I think, the top scorer for Galo actually as well. He's pulling his weight a little bit with the goals. It's just a shame the team are a little bit, in different form pretty much the whole season. 9 goals he's got in the Brasileirão this year, so he's 3 ahead of Paulinho, who's had a really poor season in my opinion. But obviously, it couldn't help them, like you said, in terms of result. No disgrace, really, losing to Palmeiras at home. And it was 2 penalties that won them the game, and the last one was in the 86th minute. And it was a little bit soft, I think, the award of it. But there you go. I think Galo have, again, like a few of these teams that, that maybe we've spoke about earlier on, it's all about the cup competitions now. I think that they're safe in the league here, just about in mid-table in 10th on 36 points. It's all about, can they win? I mean, the Libertadores is the one they'll probably go for, but can they go and win a double potentially, which would be Melito, unbelievable season, which turn quite an average season into a fabulous one. We'll wait and see, but yeah, I mean, Palmeiras, James, they keep knocking on the door, don't they?
5 wins in a row, George, for Palmeiras, 6 wins in 7. I mean, as I've mentioned a couple of times, I think this seems to be the time of season, like City really in many ways in the Premier League, where, you know, you if you're a team going up against them, you just look at the fixtures and think, it's just not going to drop any points, and they don't. They just plough on, and it just starts to feel inevitable that they're going to catch up. I mean, they are only 1 point behind Botafogo now, who obviously drew against Grêmio, a disappointing draw for them. 2 draws in a row for them. No, sorry, no, it isn't. It was in the cup. Was it in the cup? No, they got 2. Yeah, no, that was in the Libertadores, wasn't it? Sorry, just one draw. Sorry, but against Grêmio, they'd have been expecting to win that really. So they've kind of dropped the points and let Palmeiras come and breathe a bit more down the necks. Like you said, 2 penalties to win it. Rafael Veiga, who I picked out at the start of the season as Palmeiras' key man, and hasn't really managed to get going at all this season. He's been eclipsed very much so by Estevao and a couple of other players as well. Lopez, who's been doing really well. So, but he came up with the goods. You know, you still have to put the penalties in there. And Abel Ferreira, after the game, was saying Veiga was not well throughout most of the season. I had conversations with him, and maybe I visited more than that was necessary, he said, which I think was, I'm not really sure exactly what he was trying to say, but I think he was basically saying he maybe lent a bit too hard on him, pushed him a bit too hard, and maybe Veiga kind of buckled a little bit under that kind of pressure from his manager, but he stepped up and he showed why he's, you know, such a hero for Palmeiras. And yeah, I just want to ask you, George, which way you think the title's going now? I mean, you talk about Hercules there. I mean, he pulled Fortaleza up to just 1 point further back on Palmeiras. So you talk about the top 3, Botafogo are on 57, Palmeiras are on 56, Fortaleza are on 55, and there is then a 7-point gap down to Flamengo, who have a game in hand. But, you know, it looks like a top 3 now, doesn't it? And although we very much thought the Botafogo were going to run away with it, well, not run away with it, but we felt fairly certain that Botafogo were going to do the business this time. It all of a sudden looks very, very, very tight, doesn't it? I mean, which way are you going with it now? Are you still saying Botafogo, or are you going to, you know, do you think Palmeiras will just continue this excellent run? There is still 10 games, so there's still a decent amount of time for something to change.
Yeah, I think this is it, James, for me. I'm going to change my mind, actually. I think Palmeiras will win it. I think Botafogo will put up a good fight. It might only be by a couple of points. But like you said, it does have a bit of an inevitability about it. That
what is it in Portuguese? You'll know that, won't you?
Yeah, well, hang on a minute. No, I don't know, but yeah, there you go. Yeah, look, it does. It just seems to have a bit of that about it. Like City, that Hulk goal was the only goal they've conceded in the last 5 games, and they've won all 5 of them games. So, to me, it just seems like you say, like it's a bit of a train that can't really seem to be stopped. Palmeiras, Botafogo will do the best. So will Fortaleza. Kudos to them for keeping up with them. But I think both of those teams now, you asked me a few weeks ago, I think, excuse me, we're both in, pretty much agreement that they would win the league. I disagree now. I think it'll be Palmeiras, and it's a shame, really, but there you go. They're just too good. And they're not like, it's nothing spectacular. They're just, like you said, they just get the job done. They win the games. They might hammer teams 5-0 occasionally. I think they've done 2 of them over the last 5 games. But, it's nothing spectacular. They just roll on. But they know how to win. And Abel Ferreira, for all his sort of, downfalls, he's a very good coach at this level. And so is Arte Jorge, but like you said, but Botafogo just seem to throw some games where Palmeiras are at the stage of the season now. Just keep going, chugging on, get the next result, get the win, just get the win. It doesn't matter what score it is, just do it. And that's what they seem to do. And for me, I don't know what you think, James, but I'm going with Palmeiras.
Yeah, it would be a third championship in a row for Palmeiras. Like I said, it would be a little bit of a disappointment, especially for those Botafogo fans who endured what they endured last year. I think the same as well. Looking at it, I think that the difference, as I said previously, might come into play is that Fogo is still in the Libertadores, and that's going to take a lot from them. To be honest, I don't remember if we'd looked into when the last time they won it was, but I'm pretty sure it was a long, long time ago that they last won the Libertadores. I'm just having a look now. No, they've never won it. They've never won the Copa Libertadores. So they haven't won the title since '95. Either one would be enormous for Botafogo, but I feel like the Libertadores might just distract them a little bit too much, and it might be one that they think we've got a real chance here with Gallo in the other side and River Plate. They might feel they can get the better of as well. So I just feel as though they might take their eye off things a little bit. Palmeiras have no such distraction. They can just plough on. The fixtures don't look too bad for Palmeiras. Obviously, there's that big one against Fortaleza at the end of the month. Fortaleza have got Gallo. They've got Grêmio away. They've got Flu away. 2 games from the end, which, Flu could be battling for their lives. They've got Flamengo last day of the season. I think for Fortaleza, the fixtures look a bit tricky, and I think for Botafogo, like I said, they might have one eye and a half, basically, on 1.5 eyes on the Libertadores, and that might just pay for them in the end. And Palmeiras in this kind of form, like you said, Ferreira's a wonderful coach at this level, been there and done it, and Fogo, I think, might stand a better chance of being a bit more closer to them next year. But we'll wait and see. Maybe Palmeiras have used up their good run now, and that maybe they'll have a little bit of a blip. Perhaps, you wouldn't imagine that they can win all of those 10. Like I said, that was always my mantra with City when we were going up against them at the end of the season, and then they always did. So, but I don't think Palmeiras are that kind of stage. I think they might drop some points, and it's up to Botafogo to just make sure that they're in a position to pull ahead or to capitalise when they do. So, but I think you're right. I think Palmeiras are probably going to have to be the favourites for the time being, but we'll see. But yeah, who have they got next week, George? You want to do a quick rundown of the fixtures and let us know what we need to look forward to in terms of that title race, because it is looking very, very tasty, isn't it?
It is now, James. Yeah, we're coming into very much the business end of the season, so it's definitely some interesting fixtures. So you've got it starts, like I said, a bit earlier than usual on Thursday, the 3rd of October, 11 p.m. English time. Criciúma host Atletico GO. Into Friday morning, then 1:30 a.m. Fluminense host Cruzeiro. Saturday, the 5th of October, Grêmio host Fortaleza, 1:30 a.m. 8:30 p.m. then is Atletico Paranaense against Botafogo, Galo against Vitória, and RB Bragantino against Palmeiras. 11 o'clock sees Bahia host Flamengo, Corinthians host Inter, and Cuiabá against Sao Paulo. And then the matchday wraps up, James, with Sunday at 1 a.m. British time, Vasco host Juventude.
Yeah, lots of ramifications in those. We'll see how Felipe Luis gets on. Tricky game for Flamengo at Bahia, and lots of other kind of narratives to get into there. So, George, what are you picking as your game of the week? What's kind of caught your eye there? There's not any real relegation battles, or maybe Criciúma, Atletico GO. There's nothing really too much to talk on at the top with teams heading up against each other. So, what have you kind of picked out?
Well, there was 4 actually, James. I had a quick look at. One was Criciúma GO, but I thought, well, I've looked at GO today, so we'll wait and see from afar what this happens. Then I thought, what about Flu Cruzeiro? With Diniz coming back, it might be interesting. But again, we've looked at those 2 teams this week, so I thought, well, maybe let's go with another one. RB Bragantino against Palmeiras did cross my mind as well, because I think Pedro Caixinha, I don't think he's got long left, James. They're on a horrible run, and I just wanted maybe to see how they did with this. But the one that I've gone with has to be Bahia against Flamengo, James, because I want to see how Felipe Luis does, and also it's a massive game in terms of Libertadores qualification. If Bahia can get the win, they're level on points for Flamengo. So it'll be interesting to see whether they can break in to that top 4, which would be an incredible achievement for them as well. So I'm going with that one for next week. Yeah,
good one. I also thought about Flu Cruzeiro, to be honest, and I think if it had been any other week, I probably would have done, just because of, obviously, it's a pretty juicy one. Diniz going back to still the Continental champions, who he made last season, and I think that's got potential to be a really good game. Obviously, enormously important for Flu in particular. But yeah, we covered both teams this week, haven't we? So I'm going to look at Red Bull Bragantino. I think I'm going to look at Pedro Caixinha and see if he's still there. You know, maybe they'll pull the trigger on him before that. But yeah, they could do with a win. And obviously, like we said, Palmeiras are rolling on, and we haven't really looked at them in too much detail recently. So let's see if they can make it 6 wins in a row and perhaps go top of the table. Even let's see how they're both playing at the same time this week. Paranense, Botafogo and Bragantino against Palmeiras. So let's see. There'll be pressure on both of those sides, but it feels as though Palmeiras playing with a little freedom at the moment and on a bit of a roll. So I'm going to pick out that one and see what happens in that in the end.
Yeah, fair enough, James. Like I said, I thought about that one as well. I think Caixinha, they're in horrible form. Like I said, I think they've only won 1 in 10 games now. So, you know, it was a late equaliser against Juventude that saved them again, and they're really slowly slipping towards the relegation zone. They really do need something as well, like many teams do, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you let us know exactly what those teams need, George, and give us a bit of a rundown of the table just before we finish.
Absolutely. You know, it would be my pleasure, James, of course. So first is Botafogo on 57 points. Second is Palmeiras on 56. Third is Fortaleza on 55. In fourth is Flamengo on 48. Fifth is Sao Paulo on 47. Sixth, Bahia on 45. Seventh, Inter on 45. Eighth is Cruzeiro on 43. Ninth then is Vasco on 36. Also on 36 is Galo in 10th. 11th is RB Bragantino on 33. Also on 33 points, James, is Juventude in 12th. 13th is Grêmio on 32. 14th is Criciúma, also on 32. 15th is Atlético Paranense on 31. 16th Vitória on 28. Into the relegation zone, James, 17th position Corinthians on 28 points. 18th is Flu on 27. 19 is Cuiabá on 23. And propping up the table, even though they had a fantastic result over the weekend, is Atletico GO. They're on 21 points, James.
Yep, still on the bottom there, although there'll be celebration. They've probably accepted the fate, I'd suggest, by now, but at least something to shout about this weekend. Well, that just about wraps it up, George, for this week. Another busy week for us to dig into. I guess you're going to go and watch Leeds against Norwich now, are you, probably?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'll be doing, James, and let's hope we can have a win as well. There's plenty of football on, actually, today and tomorrow, so we'll wait to see what happens, and I hope whoever you're supporting wins the game, unless you're Norwich, of course.
Hey, see you next week.
I do.
Talking Brazil ball, we're breaking it down. Bringing the passion from every town. Let the world be filled with love tonight. Sway to the beat, make you feel so right. Song by song, my vibes, they're dancing in the heat. Go, go, go. Candy beats, talking Brazil ball, spreading love in every way. In the sound of paradise.